I think so. It's Jeff. He uses a fancy software, and I can't.
As will ever be.
Yep.
Make sure your mics are on. Thanks. Okay, I call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. and we will open with the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, there were agenda updates. You guys all saw that this afternoon. All right, we will open with privilege of the floor. I'm going to do a quick read of policy 1510, regular board meetings and rules. Public expression. The board encourages public participation at board meetings during a specific portion of the agenda entitled privilege of the floor, public comment. The public comment section is not the time or place to register complaints about individuals or items that have not first been addressed through the proper channels with those closest to the issue, such as a teacher, a building principal, the superintendent, or other appropriate party. Individuals making statements during privilege of the floor are expected to be courteous and respectful, modeling for our students how one can participate and have their voice heard in situations where there is an agreement or disagreement with others' views. If members of the public have gone through the proper channels and still wish to discuss a matter with the board, they can submit their comments in writing to the board clerk. At its discretion, the board may invite visitors into meetings to participate in the board discussion of matters on the agenda. The public comment section is an opportunity for residents and residents only to address the Board of Education. Public comment should take place only in the portion of the agenda designated. This is usually at the beginning of each meeting. Persons wishing to address the board must indicate their desire to speak in advance on the sign-in sheet. Because the board typically has many business items on its agenda, speakers must confine their comments to 3 minutes. The board will not address specific questions or comments, but may ask for your name and contact information in the event follow-up is necessary. The board will not permit in public session discussion involving individual personnel or students. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual personnel or students should present their comments or concerns to the superintendent, who will share them with the board at the next executive session. That includes any comments or gestures alluding to anything as well. That would appreciate keeping information about individuals out of this meeting. Okay. I think Cliff Bradshaw, you're the first indicated that's wishing to speak.
Please.
Yep. Should
Hope
be.
so.
Good evening. All right. Looking back on the last 9 months, August 17th of last year, the school board chose to ignore vast public outcry from concerned Duanesburg residents against the forced masking of our children and voted unanimously to require masks for all unvaccinated DCS students under a moderate transmission rate. The result was children who didn't mask up were isolated and pressured to mask up, and COVID Omicron variant still spread throughout the school. On December 14th, 2021, the school board meeting, after hearing many complaints, public outcry from Duanesburg residents, Superintendent Niedermeyer declared that parents can opt their children out of future equity-related events. My wife and I made 2 attempts to formally opt our child out of any all-equity school activities, one on January 22nd, and the other on January 23rd of this year. In both instances, our opt-out request was denied by Superintendent Niedermeyer and Principal Marvin. On January 18, 2022, Board of Education meeting, numerous pleas from hundreds of concerned Duanesburg residents asking this board to work together to find a better solution than that of indoctrinating DCS students in equity, social emotional learning, CRT, were again ignored. Instead, our school board voted unanimously 7-0 and passed a DEI policy, which is a subtle approach to indoctrinating students in Marxist socialist ways. March 8, 2022, Board of Education meeting. It was brought to the school board's attention that Superintendent Niedermeyer allowed our DCS students, 8th grade and up, to be exposed to a radical activist with anti-police views via May 25, 2021 Student Equity Summit. An investigation into this allegation was requested, and this school board found nothing wrong with Superintendent Niedermeyer's behavior. In a letter dated April 13, 2022, our superintendent informed me that the pedophilia grooming theme book, Lawn Boy's removal request I submitted was denied. No Duanesburg school leader, and certainly no one sitting around this table, lifted a single finger in an attempt to get this harmful adult book out of our school library. I have many more examples where I have asked this school board to work with me in the community to create a safer environment for all DCS students. All my requests were denied. Not a single school board member showed any sign of willingness to work with me. It's time for a positive change in Duanesburg, starting with the school board. Superintendent Niedermeyer, Duanesburg Board of Education, you have been served. Thank you very much.
Ava Sanchez.
I'm hoping that, you can hear me. If you could respond to me in an email, that would be appreciated. I wanted to discuss policy number 3430 regarding DEI. There are a couple of words that are concerning within this policy, and it's the words intentional and unintentional. So to read from that, it says discrimination and marginalization of any people or groups of people, whether intentional or not, have no place in our schools or district or community. So regarding our children, if a child, let's say who's in kindergarten, unintentionally says a remark that may be inappropriate, will that child be punished for or disciplined for those words? So what is the disciplinary action if a child or student goes against this policy? Because that is not stated in this policy. And I also wanted to know, I do go to the Quaker Street Bible Church, and they have been trying to restart the early release program, and I was wondering if that will be restarting either for the rest of this year, beginning of next year. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Deanna Fox.
Good evening. In a June 1967 interview with NBC News, Dr. Martin Luther King said, "It's all right to tell a man to lift himself by his own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps." That so much energy has been spent on unconscionable drivel related to the opposition of DEI policy is a true sin in this community. While countless hours are spent responding to complaints based in falsehoods, slander against teachers, attempts to remove individuals from their posts simply for doing their job, immediate issues, like the lack of appropriate functional tables in our elementary school art room, go unattended. In conversations tonight about the forthcoming school year budget, I hope that the entire Duanesburg community can come together to recognize the true injustices happening in our school. Individual teachers should not be paying out of pocket for supplies and infrastructure. Money should not be diverted to battling vicious attacks against our teachers and our school administrators. I would appreciate receipt of information regarding how much of Dr. Niedermeyer's and Mr. Rivenberg's salaries are spent responding to community vitriol and individual FOIL requests that are made without meaning or merit. Those funds should instead be put towards ensuring that every teacher, staff member, and student can walk into our school building and know they are safe, free of prejudicial judgment, and able to receive the resources they need to thrive and become thoughtful, compassionate, and productive members of society once they graduate from our district. As Dr. King also said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I hope our attendance tonight can pause and reflect on the overt and implicit ways that they continue to breed injustice in our school and community. Thank you, Dr. Niedermeyer and the Board of Education members for your time, hard work, and opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. Right, there's no additional individuals who indicated they'd wish to speak public comment, so we will close public comment and move on to the superintendent status report and update.
So there are very few things that I'm sentimental about, but tenure appointments is one of them. And so it's my pleasure tonight to recommend 4 individuals for tenure.
You might want to get closer to the mic.
Sorry. Thank you. So I'm going to recommend 4 people for tenure tonight. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be tenured. It's a really important milestone in an educator's life. And I think that it deserves some recognition and time. So before we go on to talk about what tenure means, I just want to say that making recommendations for what's essentially a career-length appointment for teachers is very important. These people have a great deal of impact on the students that are going to come in front of them, and we know that, and we don't take that for granted, and we don't take it lightly. So it requires an awful lot of trust from the community and from the rest of the staff to work with these folks. This is a beautiful community. When you look around this community, it's sometimes, I guess, overwhelming how beautiful it truly is. This is a picture from Christmas Sanctuary, which I think is really pretty, but really you can drive anywhere in our community and see the pride that people have in the town, and also just the natural wonder that we have around us. So this is a great place to work. It's a great place to go to school. And so I think that those are important things to remember when you're thinking about appointing somebody, for the rest of their career. So when we look at tenure appointments, it's important to know that teachers are first not automatically appointed to tenure. They have generally probationary periods of 4 years, 3 if you've had tenure someplace before. And so you have to work 4 years, and at our school that means you've been evaluated formally multiple times. So in 4 years you've been evaluated formally at least 12 times. And not only that, but also you have a lot of opportunity for people to come in and out of your classroom. So at a small district like this, it's definitely enough time to really get to know folks. And tenure shouldn't be an automatic. So it shouldn't be something that people just get because they've managed to hang around for 4 years. It should be something that people have earned. So like I said, we have a pretty rigorous annual professional performance review plan and pretty rigorous evaluations that include observations. And when we're looking at observations, when we go into teachers' classrooms, we look at lots of different things. So we're looking at how they can plan and prepare for their classes. We look at how they respond to different professional responsibilities, like communicating with parents, and also doing their grades on time, giving feedback to kids. We look at their instruction in the classroom and whether or not they have all the goods when it comes to standing in front of a group full of kids and making them pay attention to you. We also look at their ability to have a productive classroom environment. So can they manage a class, and is the classroom a place where learning is definitely the central focus? They're also evaluated on student performance. So how do their students do on standardized tests? How do their students do in their classes? So tenured teachers, so it's a New York State law that teachers who are tenured earn the right to keep their jobs free from discipline and dismissal, except for just cause proven in a due process hearing. So it's a serious deal to remove a teacher who's tenured. It involves basically a trial. And so they get a lot of due process in order to keep their jobs. And it's very expensive for a school district to go through this kind of process. And so for that reason, the probationary period is something that is really formal and is really rigorous. Okay. Tenured teachers have to demonstrate to their principals that they have mastered all of the different aspects of being a teacher. They can't just be a good teacher in front of a classroom, but a lousy planner or somebody who's not very responsible. They can't just be somebody who can manage a class, but just doesn't have the teaching skills. They have to be prove mastery at all levels. And so tonight, the folks that I'm going to read some statements about each of them and hopefully embarrass the ones that are here. I think all of them are here. And that's fun for me. I don't know if it's fun for them, but I think it's important to recognize just what they have to do in order to be recommended for this kind of responsibility. So the first person that I'm going to talk about is Danielle Schneible, who is here with us today. Ms. Schneible is an exemplary special education practitioner. She has extensive knowledge of special education instruction and its relationship to other disciplines. Ms. Schneible organizes her classroom so that all students can learn. She maximizes instructional time and fosters respectful interactions with and among students, ensuring that students find the classroom a safe place to take intellectual risks. Students themselves make a substantive contribution to the effective functioning of the class by assisting with classroom procedures, ensuring effective use of physical space, and supporting the learning of classmates. Ms. Schneibel's students are highly engaged in learning. They make significant contributions to the success of the class through participation in high-level discussions and active involvement in their learning and the learning of others. Ms. Schneibel's expectations are clear and invite student intellectual engagement. Her feedback is specific to learning goals and rubrics and offers concrete suggestions for improvement. As a result, students understand their progress in learning the content and can explain what they need to do in order to improve. Ms. Schneible has high ethical standards and a deep sense of professionalism. She assumes leadership roles in both school and district projects and engages in a wide range of professional development activities to strengthen her practice. She is focused on improving her own teaching and supporting the ongoing learning of her colleagues. She has developed professional developments for both faculty and staff. Ms. Schneible is also pursuing certification in education leadership to improve her practice. During her tenure here, Ms. Schneible has served as the coordinator of the PBIS and RTI programs. Next year, she will serve the district in the key role of CSE chairperson. Ms. Schneible has been a strong addition to the special education department and the school district as a whole. Danielle, would you stand so that we could recognize you? The next person is Kendra Shadina. Ms. Shadina has extensive knowledge of her content area and her students. She maximizes instructional time and fosters respectful interactions with and among students, ensuring that students find the classroom a safe place to take intellectual risks. Students themselves make substantive contributions to the class by assisting with classroom procedures and supporting each other. Students and Ms. Shadina work in ways that demonstrate their belief that hard work will result in higher levels of learning. Student behavior is consistently appropriate, and Ms. Shadina's handling of infractions is subtle, preventative, and respectful of students' dignity. Ms. Shadina's students make significant contributions to the success of the class through participation in high-level discussions and active involvement in their learning. Students understand their progress in learning the content and can explain the learning goals and what they need to do in order to improve. Ms. Shadina demonstrates high ethical standards and a deep sense of professionalism. focused on improving her own teaching and supporting the ongoing learning of her colleagues. Her record-keeping systems are efficient and effective, and she communicates with families clearly and frequently. Ms. Shadina has taken on multiple leadership roles here within the district. She has served as the Student Council Advisor for 2 years. She's been a PBIS committee member and an RTI coordinator. In addition to these leadership roles, Ms. Shadina has served on the building leadership team, social committee, and has assisted with training staff. She is innovative and enthusiastic, and her instruction is engaging and student-centered. In short, Ms. Shadina is a role model for teachers in our district. Could you stand, Kendra, so that we can recognize you? The next person I'd like to recognize is Katie Wilson, who's just come from a softball game. Miss Wilson has extensive knowledge of the physical education content area and measures her students' learning to align with the curriculum. She enables students to demonstrate their understanding in more than one way, something essential in physical education. The tone set by Miss Wilson in her classroom results in an environment where all students feel valued and are comfortable taking risks. She's able to manage relationships with students and ensures that relationships among students are positive and supportive. During observations, it appears as though students are encouraged to contribute to the success of the class through participation. Ms. Wilson's feedback is specific to learning goals, and she offers concrete suggestions for improvement. As a result, students understand their progress in learning the content and can explain the learning goals and what they need to do in order to improve. Ms. Wilson has a high level of ethical standards and a deep sense of professionalism. She's focused on improving her own teaching and supporting the ongoing learning of her colleagues. Ms. Wilson has taken a leadership role within the athletic department by serving as our athletic director this year, and she's engaged in pursuing her leadership certification to strengthen her practice. In addition, she has participated in the Wellness Committee for 4 years, the Middle School Summer Enrichment Program, and has coached modified boys soccer, modified softball, modified girls basketball, JV softball, and varsity softball, which she's just coming from. Because she looks mortified, and that's fun for me. Katie, can you please stand up so we can all recognize you? And last but not least, Isabel Kaelin. Mrs. Kaelin's plans and prepares for lessons using her extensive knowledge of the Spanish content. Her instructional design includes learning activities that are well sequenced and require all students to think, problem solve, and inquire. Mrs. Kaelin manages relationships with students and ensures that relationships among students are positive and supportive. Mrs. Kaelin creates an environment of respect and rapport in her classroom by the numerous ways she interacts with students and by the interactions she encourages and cultivates among students. Classroom interactions between Mrs. Kaelin and her students are highly respectful, reflecting genuine warmth, caring, and sensitivity to students as individuals. The tone set by Mrs. Kaelin in her classroom results in an environment where all students feel valued and are comfortable taking intellectual risks. During observations, it appears that students are highly engaged in learning. Students often make significant contributions to the success of the class through participation in high-level discussions and active involvement in their own learning and the learning of others. Mrs. Kaelin's explanations are clear and invite students to engage intellectually in the content. As a result of Mrs. Kaelin delivering her instruction, students understand their progress and can explain the learning goals and what they need to do in order to improve. I hope you're sensing a theme in what we're looking for. Mrs. Kaelin demonstrates her passion for teaching in various ways. During Mrs. Kaelin's time at DCS, she has enhanced the college-level Spanish classes. She's incorporated cultural crafts, music, and dance into her lessons. In addition, Mrs. Kaelin integrated Spanish culture into our school with school-wide activities, for example, Dia de los Muertos and Hispanic Heritage Month. Student interest has grown, resulting in an enhanced number of students who enroll in these classes. Mrs. Kaelin has also offered her Spanish expertise to her colleagues and students, and to her superintendent. She has been key to the enhancement of our LOAT program. Mrs. Kaelin has been willing to help out wherever she is needed and supports our students. She has served on the Wellness Committee and is pursuing a Spanish club. Mrs. Kaelin is a team player and a positive role model for students and teachers alike. Isabel, would you stand so we can recognize you? these folks are great teachers and they're great people, and it was an extraordinarily easy decision this year to grant them all tenure. So I hope that the board will join me in appointing them to tenure. I just wanted to talk about a couple of other things. I did want to recognize the fact that we've announced our valedictorian and salutatorian. So Jessica Archambault and Bailey Grenier have been recognized for that, and so we'll be recognizing them, and hopefully they'll be speaking at graduation. Yes, and we'll also be recognizing them in our newsletter at the end of the year, but those ladies are to be congratulated for their exemplary achievements. I also wanted to announce another thing that we started doing last year with the end of the year newsletter that you all received at your houses. So we recognize that there's lots of different ways that students can be successful in school, and we want to make sure that our graduates don't just strive for the highest grades, but also strive to gain some of the skills that we teach them throughout our curriculum. And so last year, I asked the teachers to identify the outcomes that they would expect to see in a highly successful Duanesburg graduate. And so we spent some time looking through all the different soft skill things that we teach kids. And what we landed on after a process was 4 things. The first one is critical thinking, which is defined up there. The second one is resilience. The third one is compassion. And the fourth one is self-direction. So all of these things rose to the top because they're all things that we would expect all of our graduates to have by the time that they graduate. And so what we decided to do last year, and what we'll continue to do, is to recognize outstanding seniors who possess these traits and who serve as examples of each one of these things. So we had a nomination process where faculty could suggest the seniors who best fit these traits, and then we voted on those nominees. And it's my pleasure to also recognize those folks. So we have Daniel Van Buren for critical thinking, and Mia Myers for compassion, and Diana Issa for self-direction, and for resilience, Cora Schultz. And so these are students who are exemplary in different ways other than the ways that the valedictorian and salutatorian are exemplary, although those 2 folks are also awesome people who possess these qualities as well. So we'll also be including little profiles about them in our end of the year newsletter so that we can learn more about them. But those folks are to be congratulated too. And the last thing that I wanted to say before I turn things back over is just that I had an exceptional day today in a cave with a bunch of 6th graders. So I just wanted to thank Polly Benjamin and also Karen Hildebrandt and the rest of the folks who participated in the planning of a trip to Howe's Caverns today. It was a very successful trip and a lot of fun. I was glad to be involved in that. It's always fun to see kids out of their element, and in echoey caves with a bunch of 6th graders is a good time too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. All right, we will move on to the budget presentation. There will be an opportunity to ask questions after the completion of the presentation. I hope that's when you accept any questions.
Okay, all right, you can hear me. So tonight's presentation can be found also on board docs. It's under public documents if anybody's interested in looking at it. So this is the public budget hearing. The budget vote is May 17th. Oh, sorry about that. All right, so. It's like partially working.
Hello, hello. Okay. So just wanted to reiterate something that we've been talking about throughout this entire process, which is that the budget really starts with our strategic plan. So the board has identified these goals as things that we're working toward. So not just academic achievement, but also personal development, and that's personal development for our students and our staff. Also making sure that we have safe and inviting facilities and grounds, and that we are being fiscally responsible, and we're sustainable for the long term. We've talked a lot about the kind of planning that goes into these budgets, so it's not really just about this year, but it's about 5 years and even 10 years down the road. Culture is also an important goal that we're seeking to work on, and working with partners is another part of what we look to do in our daily activities, and then finally improving our communication with the public and internally with staff. Those are all things that we're trying to do, and those goals are all in support of our mission, which is down at the bottom, which is making sure that we're giving kids everything they need to fulfill their dreams and aspirations. So I think that's really important, that we're doing this for all kids, and we're making sure that we're fulfilling their dreams and aspirations, and not necessarily our dreams and aspirations for them. So I think it's an important distinction.
Okay, so some of the biggest considerations in building the 22-23 school year budget, you've seen this slide a few times on our work sessions, is that insurance rates are much higher than original assumptions. They're just that much higher this year. We're looking at health insurance rates that increased 15%. We are also addressing a class sizes concern. We're adding that K through 6 teacher back in to address some of the class size concerns. We've seen some rising fuel costs this year. So not only heating costs, but we also have fuel that is getting our buses down the road. So propane and unleaded fuel, as well as heating fuel. Inflation costs have been much higher than desirable on the supply and contractual items. So anytime we buy something for educational, for the classroom or consumables for the schools, we are seeing those costs rise on a regular basis. A lot of times, many of our quotes will come back and it'll say, sometimes 30 days or even less that they will be honored. So the prices just keep changing. So we don't know where the buck stops on that. So the board adopted a budget the last time we met, or 2 times ago. And the decision was made to add the K-6 teacher to address cohort size needs, to continue all academic and extracurricular activities for students, so no opportunities will be cut in this budget, to refinish the gymnasium floor, which is in dire need of being addressed. It also increases to address those 15% increases for health insurance, and to continue to support instructional technology, which continues to grow in our classrooms, to continue to provide staff development opportunities. So we've seen a lot of growth in that, and it's very much needed. And then also to address that 20% plus increase in some of the budget lines for heating and vehicle fuel costs. So next we'll talk about the revenue side of the budget. So first, a little breakdown of the state aid. I'm just going to throw a couple highlights out at you. So one of the biggest good things about the state aid numbers that were coming back for next year is the foundation aid, that we're seeing that 3% increase, just like we did last year for 21-22. And then moving on down the line, we also have BOCES and special services, and this is because the district has continued to utilize BOCES as a service, because we do get aid back on using those services from the state. So it benefits us. The following year, we'll receive aid for some of those services that we subscribe to for BOCES, and that includes anything from sending kids to CTE, communications things, anything that's instructional in the classroom, professional development opportunities. So those things are all coming back as aid in the following year. And then the other thing is transportation aid. So as our costs continue to rise also in purchasing buses, well, we do recognize that. We also do get some transportation aid on that as well. So when you borrow a bus and you pull the debt service out on that, when you pay back, you create a payment plan for a school bus, it's 5 years. Well, the state also calculates that 5-year payback in their state aid plan. So overall, without the state aid, or without the UPK considered, it's $8,812,363. And then we also have that UPK program, which is not a part of the general budget, which is reflected there on the bottom, the 8.9%, or 8.9 million. So just to look at our tax levy history, you've seen this slide when we talked about tax levy in February. Over the past 5 years there, 6 years, actually going into the 6th year, this district has consistently stayed below the cap of going out to the public. So I'd just like to show to you, I just showed in green what the actual difference would be between the cap and the tax levy. Oh, it's okay. So the past couple years, we've had a cap that's pretty high, actually, 5.11% in 2021, and then in 21-22, we had 4.5%. Both of those years, we went out with a 1.9% and 1.95%, and we've again reduced it down a little bit by going down to 1.8%, while our tax is 2.62. Our tax cap, or our tax levy amount would only amount to 1.8%. This represents $150,945 on the overall revenue. This is just a general look, just kind of an estimated amount for what folks can see on their household amount for increases. So if you have a $300,000 house or assessment, you're going to see about an annual increase of about $97, give or take. Now, these numbers are just an estimate because, of course, these numbers will be determined entirely by, or a lot by your assessment values by the town. So it all depends on what town you live in as well. But this is just to kind of give folks a ballpark estimate for what it might look like for your taxes for that 1.8% increase. So through this slide in here, just to kind of summarize where we are with our tax levy. So why is our tax levy not zero? So we are a safe, harmless district because we've also had some declined enrollment. So the state has graciously kept our calculation to still give us state aid and foundation aid. So if the carpet gets taken out from underneath us, there becomes a fiscal cliff. And at some point, you have to make up for that fiscal cliff if you want to continue providing opportunities for kids. So also not increasing the tax up to the tax cap permanently is lost revenue. So we've done a very good job at not, getting up to that tax or to that tax cap, and definitely not exceeding that tax cap. So when you go out with zero, if we ask the folks to go out with a 0% increase, that's $150,000 that you don't get next year. So if you want to continue, and also, so next year, it's estimated, just looking at trends, we may see a much lower tax cap for next year for 23-24. So if you start to lose that revenue, the chart on the bottom kind of reflects where you would be. So if you have a 0% increase on your revenue side, you begin to see your expenditures go above your revenues. While our district has done a pretty good job at staying at the far left of that lane, going out with 0 and then 0 and then 0 could be damaging to providing additional opportunities.
So Jeff, so if you're not able to raise revenue, so what we're looking at is a future where we may see a decrease in foundation aid, so a decrease in state aid. If we were to put on top of that a tax cap that is smaller, what would that mean for our revenue going in the future?
Basically, as this picture shows, is that if you continue to go out with 0, there's no way to make up for that amount. So $150,000 for 22-23. You don't get that for 23-24. If the tax cap is, say, $30,000 or $50,000, you don't get to add that $150,000 without asking the public for a supermajority vote, which means 60%. So,
Or the other possibility is to do what with programming?
to start cutting the non-mandated programming. So things like athletics, things like after-school activities, programs that are extracurricular. Those things are all things that you have to consider when it comes to cuts, because we have a lot more mandates than we do not mandates.
Last question. So our bills keep rising, right?
They do.
So that's pretty common. So why do our bills keep getting higher and higher every year? Why are our expenses higher and higher every year?
Inflation.
Okay. And then on top of inflation, we also have a good portion of our budget is based on contracts, right?
Yes, that's correct. So we are tied to the contracts for health insurance, for staffing, for services that we subscribe to. So those things are all going to continue to rise. So no matter what, whether we increase the budget or not, we're still required to make those payments. So if we don't make those payments, we start to go under.
That's all I have for now.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Pop quiz. An overall look at the revenue summary. So the real property taxes represents $8,536,811, while the state aid right there near it is $8,812,363. The gap in what's remaining to make up that $18,600,000 is made up by fund balance, and as you can see, so we've done very well with this district in saving our money, and we'll continue to balance the budget with fund balance. So we're looking at 4.98% in use of fund balance from prior year to balance that budget, and then also a reserve appropriation from ERS. So that would be the last amount that would be met if we get up to that $18,600,000. What we don't want to do is overspend that budget. So an overall look at the revenue summary. So our two largest sources of revenue are between state aid and property taxes. So the property taxes and state aid has been for years, it's been neck and neck. It's about 45 to 47 or 48% between the two of them, and they kind of balance each other out. And then the other two other sources of revenue would be that fund balance and reserves, and then other funds such as other collections and Medicaid and things like that. Some of the biggest things, again, major increases from state aid come from the foundation aid increases of that 3%, the transportation aid and the BOCES aid. Tax levy increasing only the 1.8% or $150,945, while that tax cap was at $219,967. Summary of the revenue budget. So the state aid is based on the new budget as of April 7th. It did come out a little late, so we were really waiting for that. It came out just a couple days before the budget, before our board meeting was adopted. The state budget presents an acceptable outlook for 22-23, and it does sound like it could be okay for 23-24. After that, after the federal funds run out for the state, it's very gray as to where that could go, where that could lead to us after that. Foundation aid increases at that 3%. Total tax levy increase of 1.8% is less than the prior 2 years. And the appropriated fund balance is 4.98% of that budget. Expenditure side of the budget. So this is a summary of all the budget increases, and as you can see on this graph, the largest increases come from that medical and benefits side of the budget. So the budget would not have increased as much as it did without that need to increase it to pay for medical and benefits and fuel costs. So the pupil transportation and the operations and maintenance, those are those areas where we had to adjust budget lines to increase for fuel costs. So between those three categories in the budget, They represent more than half of the budgetary increases for 22-23. The instructional side of the budget, and you'll see in a later graph too, is that the instructional side of that 31% of the overall increases is about where it would be normally because of contractual obligations that need to be met with staffing and services that we subscribe to. The budget expenses, this is an overall look at the budget expenses. So the instructional portion of the budget is 49% of the overall budget. So we're almost, half of the budget is just instructional. And then we have operations and maintenance, transportation, making up not even a quarter of it. And then medical and benefits is the actual second largest portion of the budget. Well, debt service and transfers. Debt service didn't really change that much this year, just because it's been a flat year with our borrowing. General support is only about 6% of the budget. This is also a look at the component side of the budget, the three-part budget that we're also required to share. This is also in the board docs as well. So the program portion of the budget represents almost 3/4 of the actual overall budget, while then the capital and administrative represent the last quarter. And you can see the breakdown. There's a description there if you'd like to read it of some of the or of the three parts of the actual budget. So this is another breakdown on the functions portion of the budget. It's kind of a larger portion of what you've seen I've shown this slide before. This is kind of a breakdown of the different functions. So as you can see in some of the larger portions of the budget here are, again, the medical or the health insurance budget line, and then some of those, a couple of the other increases that you see are large there would be the contractual for instructional, teachers, staffing, and computer instruction, and then fuel costs for transportation, and then operations and maintenance. So those are those things just to kind of break it down and show you exactly what kind of categories we have here in the budget. Again, showing that those are the largest increases that we're seeing for next year. So this is that previous slide compounded, showing medical and benefits, $325,000 increase on the health insurance line. Instructional, $223,000 falling close behind in second place there. But the change on that is only 2.52%. And then the operations and maintenance and pupil transportation, again, those amount to the fuel costs that have increased. The budget includes adding that K-6 teachers, so even though we've got that 2.52% on the instructional side, we're still able to add staffing and still stay even below that 3% line. So the overall budget, just at a glance here, is $18,600,000. Spending, this is a spending increase from budget to budget of $715,000, or a 4% increase overall. The tax levy increase will be $150,945, or 1.8%, staying below the cap. So just to answer a question, what if the budget does not pass? Some considerations that would have to be made is to go out with a second budget vote. So the second budget vote would either be a similar, or a new budget, maybe proposed. Staff will still have to be paid, including contractual increase obligations. Health insurance increases will still have to be paid. Fuel costs will still have to be paid. Contractual obligations for services that we subscribe to for kids will still need to be paid. Cuts would include basically non-mandated items. So that includes athletics, extracurricular, after-school bus runs, furniture replacements, preventative maintenances, things like maybe mowing the lawn only once every couple weeks, field trips, and potentially non-required courses and opportunities for kids. Contingent budget would even have higher restrictions. If the board is forced to adopt a contingent budget, we would be restricted to a 0% tax levy increase and would have to consider the possibility of cutting those things that are non-mandated items. Proposition 2 on the school budget vote will be to replace 2 65-passenger buses and 1 30-passenger bus. So this continues our 10-year bus replacement plan. So we borrow and we pay for a bus for 5 years, and then for 5 years after that, typically we don't owe anything on it. So typically they'll reach a certain milestone after about 10 years, and they will be traded in, and then we replace them with new ones. And this also, this has something to do with passing DOT inspections. So after a while, they start to either rust out or they've exceeded a certain amount of mileage. There's a lot of things that start to, repair costs start to get much higher on some of the buses. And as I've noticed, some of the buses that are nearing that end, they typically, things that are expensive start to go bad. So it's time to start trading them in. So that'll be Proposition 2 on the school budget vote. This proposition will be to purchase those 3 buses not to exceed $315,000.
So this takes you through the entire journey of the budget. So we really start working on this in January. And then we went through the budget piece by piece. So we started out looking at general support, athletics, technology, extracurricular, and the tax cap. And we continued to talk about the tax cap and discuss that at the next meeting where we talked about transportation, maintenance, operational stuff. And then we had a meeting where we talked about instruction. And then finally we talked about BOCES and debt service, and had a community budget presentation. Then finally you adopted the budget. So I think that you've seen bits and pieces of this budget several times. You've seen the entire budget several times. And so at this point, it's pretty much, it is in its final form. And we're at the public hearing. And so there's really 2 different pieces left to this. There is a Meet the Candidates night because the Board of Education election is also held on the same night as the budget vote. So that Meet the Candidates night is on May 12th, and the budget vote is on May 17th in the, I think, advance the slide, and you'll see it's on May 17th in the elementary school lobby from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., and we hope that you all vote. So with that, I'll turn it over first to the board to ask any questions that you might have. You don't need to raise your hand.
Okay, sorry. Sorry. It's the teachers. It makes me nervous. I'm going to talk into the microphone and therefore not looking at you, but then I'll turn around.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Jeff and Jim, for explaining the budget in that way. I just wanted to ask, I've been approached by several of my neighbors over the last few days. They've all reported being approached by candidates for the Board of Education and being told that our budget includes specifically $120,000 to be paid to a firm in New York City that has reportedly been secured by our district to indoctrinate our children through teacher trainings. This is the words of my neighbor asking me this question. So I'm hoping, Jim, that you could speak specifically to the portion of the budget that does address staff development and state for the record that these claims that our neighbors are hearing are false, because I'd like the community to understand that, because I was very confused, and I understand why they would be as well.
So we do have several different, so the question is about $120,000 to indoctrinate children by using a company from New York City or something like that?
That's what my neighbor said.
Okay. So there is several portions of the budget that have to do with professional development. So we get our professional development both from outside consultants and from BOCES. And also many of our teachers also do professional development. So there is sections of the budget that have to do with professional development. I think that what your neighbor is referring to is what's become kind of a hot button issue, which is the use of a company called Generation Ready, which actually presented to the board earlier this year. So Generation Ready provides staff development for all kinds of different things, including DEI, which I know is the most controversial element. I'm not sure why, but it is. And also they also do training for special education. And so we're using them for both of those two things. We are not paying for Generation Ready out of our school budget. We didn't pay for them out of the school budget this year, and we don't have any plans to pay for them out of the school budget next year. We have federal stimulus money that we did use to hire trainers from Generation Ready this year. I think we have spent about $40,000 in special education and DEI training for our teachers this year, and that was federal stimulus money. And next year so far, we don't have any contract with them yet, although we are talking to them about providing a couple of different things for our teachers. So that question is interesting for two parts. One is that the point is to indoctrinate our kids by using a company, and it's not the case. It's offensive every time I hear somebody say that, first, that we are trying to indoctrinate people, and second, that it's possible to indoctrinate kids, which I don't know that it is. I can't even indoctrinate my kids to do their chores. But so that's part of it. And the other part of it is kind of a misunderstanding of how federal grants work. So I will say that where the $120,000 comes from is because there is an amount in the federal stimulus grant, the first draft of it, that included that amount for professional development with Generation Ready. We never had really any intention of using that. The federal grant goes over several years. We never had any intention of using them that long, but we had a very quick turnaround to put together this grant. And it was also very challenging to put together the grant because not everything qualifies for that federal stimulus money. So, but no, that is not true, and it is not in the budget that the taxpayers will vote on. Does anybody else have any questions?
I actually have one for Jeff. I mean, you can answer too if you want.
Okay.
So we're taking, it's roughly $900,000 we're tagging in the fund balance, and then the $100,000 reserve appropriation.
Yep.
That's like the last money we spend, right?
Correct.
The hope is to not spend that money, to be under budget, but we don't control the world.
Correct. So you're referring specifically to these budget lines right here. So yes, these are the last resort at the end of the budget. And then if those don't get spent, then they either go into savings, or we also have a reserve fund that they could go into. Or if there's, increased budget numbers for the following year, again, then we would roll that in the following year.
I have one more question.
Sure.
I just want you to check my work here, Jeff. So the medical and benefits that we're talking about, that 15% increase are for our teachers and employees, correct?
They are.
They are for our employees. So without that increase, that would leave us unable to pay for our employees' health insurance, or, because we can't do that, starting to cut programming. But if I wrote this down correctly, our increase in expenditure is over $300,000, but our tax levy increase is just over $150,000. So the tax levy increase isn't even 50% of that increase in our expenditure. Am I accurate on that?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I had my math correct. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I have a question, just a statement that it's important to note that financing a school budget is not a game of risk. We aren't here taking our best guess. We have to look at the future and plan for the future. I've got children in this district at least 6 more years, and there are many people sitting in this audience who have many more years in front of them. And I don't believe anyone here wants programs cut for their children, wants any less of an educational experience than maybe children before them have gone. So we have to do what's most responsible. What's most responsible isn't always our favorite thing out there, but it's important to look at the big picture. This is not a one and done 1 month, And I'm just going to acknowledge that if I was doing the math on the assessed value at the highest level, the 300,000, I think that's less than $10 a month. Again, I recognize that we have a lot of inflation going on now, but if I can contribute an extra $10 a month to ensure the education of the children in Dwaynesburg at the Central School District, I will gladly do so.
So just to piggyback on your comment, so it is important for us. So I know that some folks had questions about inflation and how hard inflation hits the community. I think that that is an important recognition. And it's something that we wrestle with when we're looking at the budget is, you know, we understand that people in the community are also suffering. Our staff is also suffering. However, our school continues to have bills that are we're contractually obligated to increase annually. And so that revenue has to come from someplace. And so what we try to do is, in times like this, dig a little bit more into things like fund balance reserves and to look at those things to balance the budget where we wouldn't normally want to do that. So that's really important. The other important thing too is to know that as you heard Jeff, when Jeff was talking, he was talking about the projections for the tax cap for next year and the following year. So this is a long-term marathon. So the goal here is to make sure that the school is sustainable with all of its programs well beyond when any of us in this room still have anything to do with the school. So it's to help pass that baton on with the school district still in really good shape. Jeff, did you want to add anything to that? Any other questions from the board before I turn it over? Okay. Does anybody from the public have any questions?
I actually have a couple. So previously back in January, it was around January, February, it was stated that Biden was coming out with a new initiative for electric buses. Do you happen to know when that will be happening? Oh, okay.
So it wasn't Biden's, it was actually the governor. So the governor did have a proposal for electric buses, and there is a phase-in process. I think that the phase-in starts in 2035 is maybe the deadline. It's several years. Yeah. It's several years before that, and then after that, there's also a period where schools can also ask for a waiver to do that. So we know that that's coming, but for a district like ours, we have a lot of obstacles for electric busing. One is the infrastructure. So the infrastructure is incredibly expensive. The second thing is that our district covers such a large geographic area that the technology is not really there for small rural schools that cover a large area. And if you think about our school and schools like Cobleskill, that's a ways off. So that was something that was hotly contested during the budget time, and it was kind of kicked back a little bit. So there still is a deadline out there, but it's a ways off.
Or because usually when a government mandates something, sometimes they will give extra funding. I'm just saying, sometimes. Yeah. I'm not saying
that would be an awesome thing. So usually what schools are faced with is unfunded mandates, which are, hey, we want you to do this now. However, we're not going to give you any money to do it, and you got to figure out how to make it work. But there might be, I don't know if you know anything about, there was something about the electric busing stuff. Are you familiar with that at all?
No, I'm not actually.
Yeah, I could look that up and send it to you though.
Yeah.
So, as it's been previously stated by the board and others, the superintendent even, there is a concern about underprivileged children in this area. So when there's a budget increase, that also increases rental property, home for homes. So the 1.8%, I believe, is based on the value of your home, correct?
Yeah.
Right. So we have
not the market value.
Okay, so right. But so it actually can be more than $10, during the school year, the 1.8%, depending on how much your house is worth, correct?
Well, the 300,000 was the assessed value, so your market value would be higher than that in general.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be some homes that are higher than that in Dwaynesburg. I'm sure that's some, but I don't believe that that's the majority. And at the 300,000, that's the tax assessed value. And then the estimates that Jeff gave showed $97 over the course of 1 year.
Okay.
That assessed value very rarely changes. It's only when you sell it or when there's a full reassessment done.
Well, like all of you have said before, everything is going up, including gas. I know some families are struggling just to get to work because of the gas increases. So another increase for the budget, that's going to hurt some children, underprivileged children in the area, I believe, because everything is going up, including food. It's going to be difficult for children, for their families to buy food alone.
I'm just going to speak quickly. I don't believe anybody here thinks that it's not causing hardships for folks in our community. I think hardships in our community also exist when we can't offer education that supports their growth and development into the future. So it's a balancing act, as we mentioned, and that's why we didn't go at the maximum amount we could, and we had to look at the big picture and do what we could. I understand, and I'm sorry for people going through those situations. Certainly I'm not insulated from that, but that's why we have to look at the big picture and do the best for everything, because as you've heard, the school is also affected by inflation. All of our costs increase as well. Our ability to pay our educators, we have to consider the entire picture.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. I feel like a talk show host.
I just wanted to ask what everyone thinks about not just the kids in the community and their families and their tax increases, but what about all the senior citizens that are living on fixed incomes? Their Social Security doesn't get higher, their pensions don't get higher, even with inflation. So some of them are going to have to choose between, can I pay for my heart medications this month, or do I have to set money aside for extra taxes?
Thank you. So I know that we think about senior citizens a lot. We know that there's a lot of seniors in our community that are directly impacted by the things that we do in this school. And so that is one of the reasons why we try to use other funding sources rather than just tax levy and not going up to that max cap. So Jeff, did you want to add anything to that?
No, you pretty much said what I was going to say. That sounds good.
Any other questions?
There's also the Enhanced STAR program that everyone should make sure that they're taking advantage of if they can, which is additional money from the state if you're over 65 to pay your school taxes.
He said that there's also the Enhanced STAR program. Any other questions? Get my steps in.
In addressing the federal stimulus money, what exactly was that money? Did it have allocations, or were you pretty free to decide what you wanted to do with that federal stimulus money, and over how many years and what dollar amount comes in per year?
So the question was about federal stimulus and what the different categories were for that and whether we were free to spend it however we wanted or whether there were restrictions. Did I get all those parts? So we do have, if you look at our website, if you click on the bottom of that first page, there's a little link that says Transparency Center, and it shows the breakdown of the categories that we have chosen to spend federal stimulus dollars on. Those categories are directly linked to the categories that were attached to those funding streams. So there were limits for how you could spend it. So one of the limits was on equity programming, for example, or wellness was another one. And so there was a small portion of it that was like COVID-specific reasons. We actually were able to use that first tranche of federal stimulus dollars to pay for a lot of our COVID-related expenses. And then we have this situation where we have this money that is for a limited number of things, and we have to make sure that in spending that money, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Because you don't want to create a hole when that money goes away. So I just read this letter. I won't say who it was, but it was Secretary of Education, and Secretary of Education suggested that what we should do with that money is hire more staff. And so that's hard for a bunch of different reasons. One, there's no staff to hire right now. Two, if we hire staff, what happens is we hire a person, they become exceptional educators in our system, and then when that money runs out in 3 years, we don't have any money to pay them anymore. And so we either have to let them go or let somebody else go. Or in certain situations, we can forecast out like what our retirements might be and sort of deal with it that way. But it's very hard to hire a person. So when you're spending stimulus money, a good thing to keep in your mind is that one-time money should be spent on one-time things. So good things to buy with stimulus money like that are things like technology, equipment. So if you want to buy a tractor is a good thing to buy with federal stimulus money because we got to buy it one time. We don't have reoccurring expenses except for maintenance and stuff like that, those normal things. Stuff like professional development is another thing that's good to spend that one-time money on because it doesn't have ongoing costs. It doesn't create a hole when it's gone. So what we have seen other districts fall into is that when they spend money on something that has reoccurring costs, they're in a lot of trouble. And so this stimulus that was intended to help people actually ends up really hurting a district. And I think that a lot of districts saw that, you know, back when the last round of federal stimulus stuff was happening during the last recession. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
Jim, I'd like to just say one thing on that one,
Yeah.
is that it's kind of like using your tax refund to put a down payment on a car. It's great for the down payment, but it didn't create extra income for you for the next 5 years to pay that car payment. So you find yourself at a deficit.
Yeah. I always think of those folks who go on, I don't think it's on anymore, but those like extreme home makeover shows where it's like somebody comes in and gives them this really fancy house, and then almost all those people end up bankrupt, and those houses are on the market then because they can't afford to keep up with that one-time influx of cash. Did I answer your question, kinda? Okay.
So is the federal stimulus, was it a one-time payment you just got this last year or two, or is it phased over a number of years?
So 3 years, right, Jeff?
3 years, and we receive it as we spend it.
Yeah, so we pay for something first, and then we ask for reimbursement for that thing. And those things are, like, there are these forms that we sign off. They're called FS10 forms. They're pretty exciting forms. You have to sign them in blue ink, which is, I still don't know why you have to do that, but you do. And there'll be tons and tons of amendments as we go because circumstances change and needs change. And the state knows that. And that's why there's this system for adjusting how you spend stimulus money. They do the same thing for other grants that they have. We have a lot of other title grants that work in a very similar way. There's limited things that you can spend it for. You can adjust it as you go. Anything else?
That's it.
So what you'll see is when you have a room full of administrators and they're told that they have a bunch of stimulus money that's coming to them, you'll hear primarily groans because they want to make sure it's very difficult to spend money on things that don't end up costing you down the road. Go ahead. You want to talk about, can we use that money to pay for loans and debt service?
No, because there were stipulations in that federal funding that were targeted and weren't for debt service or for any kind of loans. So it's not really, that's not what the federal stimulus, that's not why they put it out. It was to pay for these one-time expenses that we would see, and it all started with March 20th. So the start date actually for most of them was March 2020.
So we did, I will say that we did try to spend them on a lot of things and were rejected. I don't know how many times we had to redo suggestions based on, so they give us a list of things that you can spend it on, and then we put forward budgets, and then they say, no, not really. And so that happened a bunch of times until we got to a point where they actually did accept everything to be in the categories that they wanted them to be in.
Right, one of them was like to do building construction, and they recommended, even though it said that you could do building construction, it then said, well, it's not really a good idea because you're not going to get your building aid on your purchase.
Right.
So, because you also want to seek building aid, because when we do building construction projects, like for instance the bus loop that we're constructing this summer, we are going to see some aid come back on that project because we're also upgrading some of the windows in the elementary school. So things like that, when you spend federal money, you can't double dip and get that state aid back. So you either spend the federal money or you spend your own money and get aid back with when it comes to like building construction things.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
You got it? Okay, there it is. I guess they're tricky mics. We are going to move on to new business, Board of Education standing committees. Are there any committees that met since the last board meeting? Okay. We'll move on to our first board item, approve reorganizational meeting resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Duanesburg Central School District hereby votes to hold its annual reorganizational meeting on Tuesday, July 12th, 2022, instead of Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
A motion.
Thank you, Francis. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Melissa. Any comments or questions from the board? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Financial. Accept technology bid. Recommendation that the Duanesburg Board of Education award the classroom interactive audio and video capabilities, interactive flat panel installation and procurement with installation of external audio and video capabilities for the junior senior high school to Presentation Concepts Corp. At a cost of $132,472 as recommended by the Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Teresa. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Shane. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a comment.
Francis?
You said you're Jeff?
I will say that this is actually a prime example of federal funds. So we're actually using our federal funds to award this bid.
And we're doing that because equipment is a good thing to buy with one-time use funds.
Are these going to be spread over both buildings, or are they primarily for the high school?
I think that this time, a lot of them are going down in the elementary school, actually. And so right now, we've been putting them in rooms where the teachers are kind of want to be early adopters. And so now that they've seen these things in some rooms, I think that they're gaining some popularity. They're really nice setups for classrooms.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Accept health services contracts. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the health services contracts between East Greenbush CSD and Rensselaer City School District and Duanesburg Central School District for the 2021-2022 school year as recommended by the Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Tony. A second? Thank you, Diane. Any comments or questions from the board? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Accept claims auditor's report. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the claims auditor's comments on General Warrant A38 in the amount of $230,011.61 dated April 29, 2022. Do I have a motion?
One motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Shane. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Award site work bid for elementary school bus loop project. Recommendation that the Duanesburg Board of Education award the site work construction bid for the elementary school bus loop project to Cunningham Excavation, Inc. at a cost of $1,108,000 as recommended by the Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Francis. A second. Thank you, Tony. Any comments or questions from the board?
Yeah, just to say that initially we were, I guess, a little disappointed, and the high cost of the work for the capital project is due in large part to the rising cost of fuel and inflation and all these other things that we've been talking about. And so the bids came in a little higher than we expected, but after working after the bids with the lowest bidder, they were able to take a look at some quotes and remove some things from the original scope, like some trees and some other things like a maintenance area. And we're actually now under budget by a couple $1,000s. So we thought we were going to be over, which is never where we want to be. So thank you to our CM for doing that work for us.
Jim?
Yep.
Are the things that were dropped, are they things that we can do ourselves? Or?
Yeah, they're either things that we can do ourselves or things that we will take a look at in the next capital project.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Did you get that, Celeste? Under other, accept CSE minute with amendment. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the CSE meetings and their minutes from the April 12th, 27th, 28th, 29th, and May 3rd, 2022 meetings. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Shane. A second? All right, we'll give that one to Teresa. Any comments or questions from the board?
Only that was a lot of CSE meetings, so thank you,
lot.
Ms. Schneible. I know you've been extremely
Not-
busy.
Still
That's
Mrs.
nice,
Neitzel.
Mary.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
still Mary.
next year? Wow.
Just a preview for Ms. Schneible about the
For next, yeah.
the fun that is to come.
There was a lot of meetings. I know it's a busy time, so thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on to appointments, accept resignation for retirement, L. Cool. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation for retirement of Lori Cool, High School Main Office Secretary, effective August 31st, 2022. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Diane. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Melissa. Questions or comments? Tony's shaking her head. She's not voting on this one.
Been here a long time. She loves this place. I know. But I'm glad because now we can go garage sailing.
Yeah, just that Mrs. Cool is pretty great. She lives up to her name, so she will be missed.
Yeah, absolutely. I second that. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Accept resignation of Kay Hoteling. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation of Kelly Hoteling, school counselor, effective May 30th, 2022. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Melissa. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Francis. Any comments or questions? And I believe she was leaving education, right? She's
taking a new job.
taking a new job. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Accept resignation, D. Halbaum. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation of Dorothy Halbaum, food services employee, effective June 24th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Shane. Diane, second. Thank you. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approve tenure appointments. Be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby appoints the following instructional employees to tenure in the following tenure areas, effective on the day noted. Isabel, Kaelin, Foreign Language, effective September 1st, 2022. Catherine Wilson, Physical Education, effective September 1st, 2022. Danielle Schneible, Special Education, effective September 1st, 2022. Kendra Shadina, English, effective October 7th, 2022. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Teresa. Do I have a second? Tony?
Yep.
Any comments or questions from the board?
I emphatically support these tenure positions.
Agreed.
Well, I
Agreed.
just think after the past 2.5 years that they even had to do their tenure time during this mess,
Yeah.
I applaud you.
Absolutely. Congratulations, lady. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Take a moment. Approve election inspectors. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the following election inspectors for the May 17th, 2022 budget Board of Education election vote at a rate of $15 per hour. Names as listed. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Diane. Tony, will you second? Thank you. Any comments or questions?
It wouldn't be a vote without Maxine and Forrest.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approve appointment M. Neppel. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Melissa Neppel to a 4-year probationary appointment as an elementary teacher in elementary tenure area, Master's Step 5, commencing July 1st, 2022 and ending August 31st, 2026, contingent upon compliance with the requirements of the education law. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Melissa. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Francis. We'll give that one. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approve appointment P. Nicolaus. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the following substitute appointment as recommended by the Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. All appointments are employees at will, and appointment at this time does not guarantee employment for the entire school term or year. Phil Nicholas, substitute bus driver, effective May 3rd, 2022. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Diana. Second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? Oh. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, if I have the agenda right, that concludes the regular session this evening. We will make a motion to move into executive session at 7:59 p.m. The board will not be returning, and the executive session is to discuss negotiation issues.
Can I add to that also negotiation issues and real estate, potential real estate transaction?
Okay, thank you for that. And we will not be returning to conduct any further business in the regular meeting. Do I have a motion to move in? Thank you, Shane. A second, Diane. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.